It's been a minute since I've reviewed a new album. Father Aphex Twin, give me strength. Hey everyone, CWD Music here. I'm CWD, and this is going to be a music review of the new Prurient record, Rainbow Mirror. Prurient is the long-running moniker project of singer-songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, producer Dominic Furneaux. Dominic's been making music for a while now, at least since the late 90s, and he has a large, prolific catalog that is pretty impressive, to say the least. It would take weeks to be able to get through all the stuff that Dominic has put out, not just as Prurient, but as his other monikers as well, such as Vatican Shadow. But despite all of these different releases from Dominic, he is best known for the project, the moniker, Prurient. Prurient makes a lot of noisy, drone, dark ambient that is pretty chilling and at times pretty cacophonous and abrasive. Most certainly abrasive. He definitely delivers on the abrasion with a lot of his projects. His last album, Frozen Niagara Falls, that came out in 2015, I love that album a lot. It definitely was an album to keep me engaged for 90 minutes, which is pretty impressive for electronic music. Frozen Niagara Falls is actually how I caught on to Prurient, and from what I understand, it's actually how a lot of people caught on to Prurient, so that was an interesting little gateway record, even if it was not exactly accessible, relatively speaking. So when I heard that Prurient was going to come out with a new record, I was definitely intrigued. I was definitely looking forward to what Dominic would have in store for the listener. 2 years later, since the release of Frozen Niagara Falls, 2.5 years I believe, what I can definitely rely on with Prurient is making an idiosyncratic experience for the listener whilst simultaneously torturing them in noisy, abrasive, BDSM sort of fashion. So I've listened to this album a few times, and I gotta say, this is definitely the single most ambitious electronic album of this year, for numerous reasons aside from the obvious. This album is 15 tracks in length. It's 3.5 hours long. So definitely delivering on a lot of progression and a lot of ambition on his part, making an album that is almost the same length as The Godfather. But what's interesting about this album is how accessible it actually is, which is weird considering the fact that, again, it's 3.5 hours long. On one hand, you do have to make legitimate time to actually start listening to this record. You can't just decide out of the blue, oh, I'm gonna listen to Rainbow Mirror like in the middle of the day for like no reason. No, you have to have like legitimate time to. Otherwise, the experience that Prurient wants to deliver won't be the same as it ought to be. What I mean by it being accessible, though, is the fact that, one, there's no single track on the album that's over 20 minutes long, and two, there's something enticing about how the album begins. The opening track itself is a little under 6 minutes, and the couple tracks aren't necessarily the longest on the record. The track Walking on Dehydrated Coral is about 11 minutes long, and Midnight Kabar is about 9 minutes long. So these are some of the shortest tracks on the record, and that's pretty interesting, because I remember when I was first sampling this record around 2 a.m., and the album was so promising when I was initially listening to it that I almost kept going. If I did keep going, the album wouldn't be over until about 5:30, maybe 6 a.m. So this album is kind of dangerous in a way, because if you are someone that does love or have a strong appreciation for noise, drone, and dark ambient type music, or at least electronic music that is definitely ambitious and definitely cohesive, then you're going to have to be careful when you start listening to this, because once you've got to the third or fourth track on the record, maybe the fifth track, there's little to no way you're going to want to get out. Since the album starts off really, really well and keeps maintaining the cohesion and the abrasion and the straight cacophony that it establishes at the very beginning. The track Barefoot God is easily the single most accessible track on the record. It's about, like I said, 6 minutes long. It definitely gives you a sample of what is to come of the record. All of this abrasive, but not like upfront noise that's in the background. All the cacophonous synth and atmosphere that it captures. There's definitely quite a bit that Prurient does on this track alone that makes the listener intrigued as to what the remaining 3.5 hours would do for the album as a whole. The production for what Prurient is trying to capture is actually really fantastic. I love the atmosphere of the album. Tracks like Midnight Kabar and Okinawan Burial Vaults definitely have a knack for capturing a cacophonous and really eerie and at times disturbing atmosphere. The album sounds like divulging into a cave or a crypt or some kind of rift on the bottom of our ocean, and there is no light at the end of the tunnel. You're pretty much just going through this darkness trying to figure out where the end is when it's likely that there isn't one. The track April Fool's Day Aspect Sinister has all these weird and juddering, some kind of string or wobbly bass synth of some kind that is very fascinating, and it definitely just maintains the sort of eeriness and creepiness all throughout the course of the 15-17 minutes it goes on for. The average track, once you get past Midnight Kabar, is going to be within the 14, 15, 17 minute mark, with the longest track, Buddhist, Strangled, and Vines Part 2, being the longest track on the record at 18 minutes. So it can be pretty exhausting going through one 15-minute long song after another, but that's perfectly okay since it's going to keep staying consistent all throughout the course of the length it's going for. A track like Chaos Sex that goes on for 14 minutes definitely maintains the sort of coitus of discord that the title implies all throughout. It's an incredible track how noisy and abrasive and just straight up pummeling this individual track here is. So no complaints about the production at all, and certainly no complaints with the instrumental path that Prurient is going for. This album is not similar to Frozen Niagara Falls, not just in terms of length, but Frozen Niagara Falls was blatantly an industrial, harsh noise, dark ambient double album. This album is a fusion of all these different styles as a whole. I definitely dig the sort of hybrid marriage of what this record is trying to go for. The track Blue Kimono Over Corpse has a nice, interesting, post-rock sort of introduction that keeps building over and over until the noise is overtaking the track in such a beautiful way. That's one thing I do have to note about this album. There's not necessarily a clear melody on all of these tracks, no clear harmony or nothing that is going to blatantly stick out throughout the course of the track. Whilst this is going on, there's going to be all these different intricacies going throughout the whole track that definitely keeps me engaged from beginning to end. And each time I listen to this record, it ends up not feeling like it's 3.5 hours long. It's kind of like when I was listening to the Autechre record last year that I also reviewed. Check that out if you have not checked that review out, and if you have not checked that album out, and if you love IDM, check that album out. After listening to it so many times and becoming more and more familiar with each track, that album didn't feel like the 4.5 to 5 hour gargantuan monster that it is. With this album in particular, Prurient is definitely capturing a incredible incredible sort of cacophony. That's one thing that kept going through my mind when I was listening to this album. It is cohesive and cacophonous. It is without a doubt just so in the moment. It's definitely encapsulated within a dark sort of orb of sorts. A track like Naturecum, which is the only track on the album that features vocals, even if those vocals are both indiscernible, and I love how he actually uses that as another element of the noise and creepy dark ambient that he's going for, as there's all these like weird shrill revving synth going on that I thought was really awesome. Okinawan Burial Vaults reminds me of going through a literal burial vault and kind of being trapped in there. Falling in the Water definitely once again delivers on the noise, and the track Lazarus Flamethrower Sleepwalk sounds like you're literally encapsulated in fire. There's all this crackling going on in the background that I love a lot with this track, and it definitely is a great example of what Prurient can do with so much time and with so minimal-ish in terms of relativity of a genre. And the closing track, Buddhist State, definitely feels like the name it is. The sort of nirvana within this noise as the album comes to a close. And once again, he's definitely able to capture that within 10 minutes. So I don't really have anything negative to say about the album. The only slight misstep I would say that the album takes is with the track Buddha Strangled in Vines Part 2. I feel like Buddha Strangled in Vines Part 1 does a much better job at establishing what Prurient was trying to go for. And Part 2 elongates itself about 10 minutes, and I don't think it makes itself stand out as well as Part 1 did, unfortunately. It's still a good song, but it's definitely my least favorite track on the record. And I suppose the track Path is Short doesn't really do a whole lot that makes itself defining all throughout the course of the record. But that's pretty much preferential, I would say. The one thing I do have to note about this album is that everyone is going to experience all these tracks pretty differently. Each of these tracks here are solidly written, executed, and produced, and from there it's pretty much the listener's preference. If there's someone that actually loves or has a strong appreciation for the sound, they're definitely going to have their own preference as to like what track was one that stood out amongst all the others, considering the intricacies and all the different stuff that's being thrown into one track after another. But that's really it. I really do think Prurient delivered with this album, and I can honestly say that this is my favorite electronic album of the year. If you're someone that loves Nine Inch Nails, specifically the Ghosts 1 through 4 album they dropped in the mid to late 2000s, if you're someone that likes artists like Merzbow, if you wished Aphex Twin had sort of a gothic phase, then definitely give this a try. If you're someone that has an appreciation for a lot of harsh noise, dark ambient, drone, things that, while they don't necessarily have a sort of exciting and in the moment and sort of pummeling sort of thing in the physical sense, but in the more mental and sonic sense, then definitely give this album a try. I definitely recommend this to people that have a strong appreciation and love for this music. As for me personally, yeah, like I said, it's my favorite electronic album of the year, and I'm definitely going to be looking forward to what Prurient is going to be doing next. If he's going to keep being this ambitious, this thorough, and just this creative with the sort of niche that he has established for himself for the time to come. This album is a plus 2.6 out of plus 3. I do think that a couple of the tracks could have either been reworked in a certain way or just done without it entirely. Even then, I probably would have ended up liking the album a little more than I do now. So I'm definitely intrigued with what Prurient could do next with this particular sound, or if he's going to keep doing this sound period, because he seems to find a lot of different avenues with the sort of genre that he has been a major pioneer for and a major figure in. But if you give this album a listen, what'd you think of it? Did you like this album? Did you dislike this album? Was the album too long? What was your reasoning for this, and what should I consider listening to and reviewing next? This is CW Music here, signing off.